Good afternoon. This is your host, John, of the Research Review, creating a platform to connect and inspire. I'm here with another excellent guest today, Hunter.
Hi.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your research?
I am a third-year neuroscience pre-med major, and I study the relationship between the neuroimmune system and depression.
I didn't know you were a pre-med major, too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What specialty do you want to do in the future?
I'd like to focus on mental illness, and there's a big new emerging field in medicine. It's circadian medicine.
Circadian medicine.
Yeah.
What would a medical professional in circadian medicine be called?
Not entirely sure.
That's still to be determined. Maybe you can be the one to make up or to name that position.
Maybe. I don't think I will, but
we'll see. Well, yeah, go in depth a little bit more about your most recent research project.
So I'm still working on finishing everything, but the general idea is that stress is heavily related with the development of neurological disorders such as anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And the lab I was in is looking into a possible mechanism behind depression, and this would be related through the immune system. And so there are these signaling molecules called cytokines that are have a huge role in the immune system, and they also directly communicate with the nervous system, specifically through the vagus nerve, which is all throughout your body.
Okay. Like head to toe?
Yeah, it's a cranial nerve 10, and it largely controls your motor function. So being able to move your hand, that's your vagus nerve.
Yeah.
And it also has sensory information passed up back to the brain.
Interesting. So, from what I understand, the mechanism you're talking about is stress would trigger the immune system, which then affects depression?
Yeah. So, stress releases cortisol in humans, and then it has many different effects in the body, and it interacts with the immune system.
Cortisol in itself?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, the kind of general idea behind the study I did was we as humans experience stress a lot. Mm-hmm. And we also are constantly exposed to microorganisms.
Right.
So the idea behind the experiment was, does stress activate the immune system so we are more responsive to microorganisms? So therefore, our cytokine levels would be higher and it would create a sickness response. Mm-hmm. And that is very related to depression, because if you think about it, a sickness response is decreased motivation. You want to sleep all day.
Right.
Basically everything you feel when you're sick besides the fever.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the background of the study.
No, that sounds very cool. That sounds very interesting. Now, do you think there are any non-physiological factors that would allow stress to influence depression?
Yes. Stress is incredibly complicated, and I'm definitely no expert.
Yeah. I know it's really not well understood at all.
Yeah. The release of cortisol in humans is controlled by a lot of different regions of the brain or regions in the body. Mm-hmm. So you have a perceived psychological stress, like you're dreading work or something, that can signal to a part of your brain that releases hormones that will eventually reach your adrenal gland to produce cortisol. Mm-hmm. And then therefore you have increased cortisol. And then there's also just other physiological things. Certain diseases cause increased cortisol levels. If you are in a dangerous situation, you're going to have increased cortisol.
Right.
Say you have a physical injury, you're going to have increased cortisol, because that's the your nervous system just reacting.
Yeah.
So it'll release the cortisol.
Now you have a physical injury. Is there a spike in cortisol right after the injury, or is it something that's still produced, say, weeks afterwards?
It's pretty immediate.
It's immediate?
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. So, what have you learned from the study so far? Is the original hypothesis so far looking to be true, or?
That's complicated.
Yeah.
Especially since I haven't finished all these tissue regions that I've collected from rats.
Right.
But overall, we're kind of seeing that acute stress does not prime the immune system, so it has a higher response to microorganisms. But there have been other work in other labs that say differently, but there were some differences. In our study, we used just like straight E. coli.
Yeah.
But in the other studies, they used what are called lipopolysaccharides.
I've heard of polysaccharides before.
Yeah.
We've
So
heard of 'em.
those are the things on like bacteria that will like say, hey, this isn't supposed to be in our body, and then your immune system will attack it. And they're also related to like toxins that bacteria releases that make you sick.
Now, what other labs are doing research like this?
My PI worked in a lab a while ago that looked into this.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure if there's anyone who specifically published data about this, but he specifically has worked in a lab that did this study.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, what was your main role in the lab? What did you do hands-on wise?
From the beginning, we kind of prepared hundreds of different tubes that will eventually put tissues and stuff we collected from the rats in.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the biggest thing is we handled the rats, so they get used to us touching them, and that only takes a couple days. Rats are actually pretty friendly.
Really?
Yeah, mice are the ones that are aggressive.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why is that? I think it'd be the other way around.
I know.
People view mice as very cute and have them as pets, then people view rats as
Yeah.
monsters that chew through your house.
Generally, rats don't bite people in laboratory settings. It does happen, but I've gotten bit by mice many times.
Infected mice or non-infected?
Not infected mice. All of our stuff, the animals have to be clean, spotless, or else they can't be used.
Good. Turn you into Mouse Man or something.
Yeah.
Random thought as I'm drinking this Red Bull, coming from someone who studies neuroscience, what are the effects of caffeine? Are they I've heard that they're positive. I've heard that there's negative effects. Are there any bad? What are the effects of caffeine on the brain?
So it has different effects on different people.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of research on people with ADHD. It actually makes you feel calmer.
Yeah.
Than rather energized.
That's
But
kind of the same thing with Adderall.
yeah.
It's stimulants.
Exactly,
Are used for
yeah.
people with ADHD, but they seem to have a reverse effect on them.
Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily know why.
Yeah.
I haven't really looked into it. But the general idea is it doesn't make you tired because it blocks certain receptors in your brain. I think it's in the region of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus.
Yeah, it's the sleep receptors.
In
Right.
circadian rhythm. It's largely related to the brain region that controls circadian rhythms.
Okay.
And that, I don't know the exact receptor, what exactly signals, but I know it blocks. It's an adenosine form, signaling molecule. So it could be cyclic AMP or it could be ATP.
Adenosine?
Yeah, adenosine.
A2A receptors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they bind to those and they block
Okay.
adenosine from binding to them, and the adenosine is what makes you tired.
Right.
It's not the only thing that makes you tired, but has a large effect. So if it blocks that, then you feel more energized. But then right after the caffeine, goes away, you're gonna have that large buildup of adenosine.
Yeah.
And then that's why you feel that crash.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, actually. That's interesting, because I think a lot of people think caffeine is it's some magical powder goes into your brain and starts stimulates everything. It's something that's going in to feed it, but really it's just blocking. It's just blocking out. Yeah, that's very interesting.
I'm sure it binds to other regions of the brain and has other effects, but that's the only one I know about. So.
Yeah, that's the only one I know about too, because I do like caffeine.
Yes.
So, but I made sure to do a little bit of digging into it before, just so I'm well aware of what I'm consuming.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the same thing that I kind of find out. What's the other research project you're working on?
In the other lab I'm working in.
Yeah.
So this other project studies the relationship of what are called endocannabinoids and their role in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which controls circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
Like essentially, it's called the master clock.
The master clock.
Yeah.
What's the like?
So like what it does is like you have all these different rhythms going on in your body of like, you'll have certain protein, like cortisol is on a rhythm.
Okay.
So like it is essentially like the SCN signals, and then eventually it'll reach the region of the body that produces cortisol, and it'll tell it when to release. And that is like, so you have different levels of cortisol throughout the day.
Yeah.
And that's highest in the morning, like around 6 a.m., and then around that area. I think I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's when it starts like peaking. Okay. And then it decreases throughout the day.
Now, this rhythm, is it based on, like the time of the day, based on, external factors? Like
yeah,
the sun?
it's based on like all external factors. Well, not all external factors. There is what's called a free running period. Mm-hmm. So when you have like no external stimuli, no light, no nothing, you go into what's called a free running period. Okay. And that's just your like biology running on a cycle, on its like natural like allotted times. And it's humans, that's about 24 hours. Okay. In mice, it's about 23.7 hours. And
during this free running cycle?
Yeah, free running cycle. Their circadian rhythm is like 23.7 hours. 23.7. And then in humans, it's like 24. And actually, when humans are in constant darkness, I think our free running periods actually get a little bit longer than 24 hours.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Why does it line up exactly with one day? Is it just like a coincidence?
Probably has to do with like evolution and like the light cycle. Yeah. Because the main thing that influences like circadian rhythms is light. There's a direct connection from the eyes to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus because it's directly above the optic chiasm, which is made up of the crossing of optic nerves. Right. So like optic nerves signal directly from the eyes to the SCN, and then that has a whole bunch of implications there. Yeah. No,
that's interesting. As you'd think something like that would be different from person to person based off of, like the sleep schedule. Mm-hmm. Like someone's 6 a.m. could be, my noon, depending on when we get up. But that's interesting to think that it's based on light. Yeah. Yeah.
And like there's a whole bunch of things that like disrupt us, like blue light at night.
How does that disrupt us? Because I've heard a lot about that.
So basically, this blue light, it activates certain receptors in the eyes that will communicate with the SCN. Mm-hmm. So then therefore, when you have this photic input, then it's saying, oh, it's daytime. I'm not supposed to be sleeping yet.
Right, and that's what keeps you up.
And it like disrupts your rhythms. And there's actually some interesting research somewhat related to the other stuff I'm researching, is that like people work night shifts and are constantly exposed to like light when they're supposed to be sleeping, have those increased cytokine levels, so they're like in like a higher risk for depression.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So I mean, sleep plays a very important role in preventing depression. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is the ideal time that we should put the phones down?
When it starts getting darker.
Okay.
The best thing to do is start dimming the lights in your house around like when it officially gets dark. Then that's when you should put your phone down. Yeah. That doesn't mean you have to go to bed, but
just turn the lights off. Like read a book or something.
And like you can do like different kinds of light that don't show like have large amounts of like the blue light.
Do you know who Dr. Andrew Huberman is?
No.
He is a neuroscience professor over at Stanford, and he has a really interesting podcast. It's similar to this one, actually. It's a lot more science focused, and he
It's
has a lot of
like
other
really in depth.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he has a lot more like neuroscientists on. But he said, I listened to his podcast because I take a lot of inspiration away from him.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying something like, as soon as you get up, you want to expose yourself to natural light
Yeah.
as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to just be waking up from natural light. I know there's like been a lot of studies, and like people just feel so much better just from waking up. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm up now. Versus like when you have an alarm, you'll like dread getting up.
Right. it's just that nasty noise like banging into your
Yeah.
ear and everything. It's not a great way to start the day.
Right.
Not a great way at all. So like, what do you think the ideal time to get up would be?
A little after dawn.
Like a little
I
after
mean,
dawn.
Kind of like when the light gets a little bit brighter.
Yeah. Now, what about just your understanding of the circadian rhythm in general? What do you think the ideal daily schedule would be like in terms of, getting up, eating, and, going to bed?
I mean, you eat like right away.
Right away?
I think
Okay.
lunch. I don't know if the best advice for this necessarily, but kind of when your body says you're hungry.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Just.
and then you don't want to stuff yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because like after eating, you probably want to be still feel a little bit hungry.
Yeah.
And lunch, I think, should be the biggest meal.
Right.
And then dinner, probably a couple hours, maybe like 4 hours before bed.
4 hours before bed. I found that's my favorite thing. And I know you mentioned to just kind of listen to the signals of your body.
Mm-hmm.
There was a really interesting course that I took here called intuitive eating. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's a new theory, and it's kind of it's based on anti-diet culture, basically.
Interesting.
I mean, a lot of the diet plans say, you can only eat this certain amount. You can only eat certain foods. You can only eat at certain time periods. You can't eat between this time and this time, and it's teaching you to ignore the signals of your body and then try and reprogram your brain
Right.
based on a schedule. Now, the theory of intuitive eating basically says that statistically, diets don't work. And in a lot of cases, people actually end up gaining weight from diets long term. I think it's a very interesting theory. They're coming from my perspective. I used to be over 200 pounds, and I lost close to 80, I think,
Wow.
in total. But I mean, and I didn't eat intuitively. I ate, on a structured plan, a very high caloric deficit. It's not healthy. It wasn't healthy, I could tell you that. But coming from that, I have certain doubts about intuitive eating theory in terms of like if this is really the best way to lose weight. But there's a lot of strengths to it as well. I think there's more strengths than weaknesses, and it's a really interesting theory overall. But I mean, basically, just talks about rejecting, the diet mentality, honoring your hunger. So I mean, if you're hungry, eat. Just listen to the signals of your body, and
Right.
like you said, don't stuff yourself. Still feel a little hungry after you eat on top of that. Making peace with food, not feeling guilty after, having one piece of chocolate,
Right.
and then, creating that feeling of self-doubt and wanting to give up on yourself.
Right. And another thing to factor in is each person needs different levels of protein or different levels of fats
Right.
or sugars and stuff.
Yeah. So,
So-
yeah, I mean, everyone's needs are different.
Right.
Everyone's needs are different. And then there's like 10 principles of the theory. I only listed the ones that I think stand out. And then the one that I really enjoyed learning about, and I tried, and I've been doing this with my meals, but it's trying to get the fullest sensory experience out of your meal.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, normally we eat at lunch and we got music playing or we're watching something and we're just eating as fast as we can. And a lot of times you should be able to recall what you had for breakfast, A lot
Right.
of times people need to think about that for a minute. They said treat eating as an experience, and you're going to be able to enjoy it a lot more. So, I mean, just find a peaceful place. Don't go on your phone or anything, and just take time eating. Take time to chew your food. And for one of our activities, we had to journal, we were chewing it. And as we were chewing the food, we had to journal what we were experiencing in that moment, and like write down the senses or write down the flavors. And they said, yeah, that will like really enhance your relationship with food. So
interesting.
I thought, yeah, that was very interesting, and
Yeah.
I think
I sort of did that earlier with Jimmy John's. Yeah. It was really good.
Well, anytime you go to Jimmy John's, you got to appreciate that. But yeah, I think weight loss is another story, but I really think ideally for people just trying to live a healthy lifestyle, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Just listen to your body.
Right.
Don't stress about diet culture.
Right.
And just eat intuitively. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So you said you were on the pre-medical track.
Yes.
Why'd you pick neuroscience as your undergrad specifically?
First took a course of psychology in high school. I was like, wow, this stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
But I also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and like I have a lot of depressive symptoms and anxiety.
Yeah.
And that's largely where a lot of this comes from, because I want to understand what's happening to me and other people.
Mm-hmm. So do you think studying this has given you a lot better understanding of it?
For sure.
Yeah.
And it just it's kind of like inspiring me, like, hey, there's still a lot of unknown stuff here. What exactly is going on, and what can we figure out to possibly help people that are going through it?
Right. I mean, yeah, the opportunities in this field are endless. It's people like you who are going to make a big difference.
I appreciate that.
Building the foundation, and it's going to change a lot of people's lives, I think. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, what's been some of the coolest stuff that you've learned studying this and then, doing your research?
Really, it's just like learning all the different things that are going on inside the brain. I still know so little about the brain. There's so many different little bundles of neurons that have all these different functions that can affect other parts of the brain. And then that'll it's all so interconnected, and just one small thing can have a cascade signaling effect in your brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean the brain's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an organic computer in a way.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And it's so cool that we don't understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the world's greatest mysteries is just sitting in our heads.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's one of the most, I think, fascinating fields in medicine and biology is studying that.
For sure.
Yeah. So, what specialty did you say you wanted to go into in medical school? I know you said it was kind of an emerging field.
Circadian medicine, but I want to still focus largely on mental illness or neurological diseases.
Yeah.
And there's actually been a lot of research on circadian rhythms and their role in degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis, and some other ones. I know there's been a pretty big, one of the leading researchers in the circadian field. He studied glioblastoma.
What's that?
Brain cancer, essentially. And he studied the rhythm of these cancer cells in the brain. And I don't remember exactly what he found, but
yeah,
I think it was something to do with when it is best to give treatment to kill these cancer cells and stuff like that. But I'm sure there was a lot more that I'm just not remembering. I listened to him talk probably over a year ago now.
Okay.
So
in a conference?
He actually talked here at Kent State.
Really?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Are there any other upcoming neuroscience conferences or conferences in general that you're aware of? Yeah,
there's actually on the 28th and the 29th, there's going to be a neuroscience symposium.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it research stuff?
Yeah, it's going to be. I'm not going to present it.
No. Why not?
I've already presented my stuff at a conference, this one, that I did for sure. I'm not finished with, and I'm not going to be finished by then. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I really have enough for a big kind of thing like that, because it's for the Brain Health Research Institute.
Okay.
And it's celebrating the contributions Kent State has given to the neuroscience field.
Yeah. You presented yesterday, too.
I did, yeah.
We both presented yesterday with our 3-minute theses.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know what a 3-minute thesis is, it's basically where we stand in front of a panel of judges and peers, and then we give a summary of our research in 3 minutes. And we both did that yesterday. So how do you think that went?
I think I did all right. I had to present twice because the first time I was really anxious, and I just froze, and it's like, can I take a break?
Yeah.
And then the second time I did pretty good, but I know I lost some points because I definitely went over 3 minutes, and I probably lost some points for other things on my poster. So, but I was just happy to talk about it.
Oh yeah, it's we spend so much time working on this, and this is our this project is. My research projects are some of my most proudest things that I've done. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we spend so much time working on it and so little time communicating it and advertising it and sharing it with the world. Moments like those, like with the 3-minute thesis and the symposium, and even having this that's the reason I started the podcast.
Right.
It's really cool to be able to have those moments to express what you're so proud of.
Right.
In doing.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it was cool. I was actually under 3 minutes. He had cards, and when there was 10 seconds left to go, he flashes the red card.
Right.
And then as soon as he flashed the red card, I said my last line. Because I didn't bullet point, I memorized it completely. Yeah. And I killed it. But it was at 10 minutes, and then I see the red card, and then I just go, examples of that can include, and then I just repeated my last 2 lines.
Yeah, I don't think I even looked at the cards. I was just kind of forgot it. That was on a time limit.
Yeah. Well, was that your first time presenting?
No, it was my first time doing a 3-minute presentation.
Yeah.
Which is really just, I don't think it's enough time. But
well, that's why they do it.
Yeah, you're just trying to just kind of cut to the chase. But I like explaining the background in depth.
Well, yeah, there's a lot more that we should talk about in the 3 minutes that's given.
But
yeah.
I've presented at a big conference. It's called Society for Research on Biological Rhythms, or SRBR. It's a biannual meeting, and I was in there May, and I presented my research on the effect of endocannabinoids on the circadian rhythm.
How'd that one go?
The results of the experiment or the presentation?
Both.
The results still kind of preliminary. Basically, I'm going to repeat it with a higher dose of a drug, because we saw, without getting into the details of the experiment, there was not a response in females, but there's a response in males, but it wasn't significant. But it also matches with other data in the lab. So we're going to increase this dose that the mice would be receiving. So then we can say, this definitely is something going on. Yeah.
Now, how'd the presentation in general go?
I practiced a lot. It was really, really cool, really good. There's only a couple undergraduates there, but there's each night there's hundreds of posters. There's aisles and aisles of just poster boards.
Really?
Yeah.
That must have been cool to see all of that.
I saw some really cool presentations from Harvard, Stanford,
really?
UCLA. Yeah. There's Dartmouth. There's so many cool things going on.
Yeah. Well, what was some of the coolest projects you saw?
The one that sticks out to me was this guy from Harvard. He was basically researching electrical input to the suprachiasmatic nucleus from light. Yeah. And basically what he was finding is that signals to the entire suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is kind of weird because there's multiple layers of the SCN, and they both have different functions. So it's all this input goes into it all at the same time, but then the next half is of his research that he's going to look into is what happens after that in these different regions.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool.
That's the next step in his research, to see what happens afterwards.
Yeah, it's basically what do these regions do with this input. So
That would be interesting to look into.
Yeah.
Do you think it's out now?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna check.
It could be.
I'm gonna check afterwards.
I don't remember the guy's name that was doing it.
No, that sounds really cool. Now, what do you think doing research in general has taught you? And in terms of not only your academic journey, but just with life in general.
It's kind of taught me like a different view of the world, saying like, kind of like where, like you can research all these different things, but is it that important? Like, is it going to have implications in like human life?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't necessarily know how to explain that further, but it's just kind of like, just interesting, like, thinking, hey, that might be something worth looking into.
Yeah. A lot of people do research in general just to expand human knowledge in itself.
Right.
And I've noticed a lot of projects, they go by the wayside, just brushed along, and people are like, oh, that's cool, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really have any effect on us.
Right.
And sometimes a publication will, and there's some pretty cool stuff that can be built off of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it sits on the shelf for 50 years.
Right.
And is used again by either another academic or someone who wants to build something off of that. And then sometimes it just is just brushed by the wayside.
Yeah.
Just sits on Google Scholar forever.
Yeah. And then like sometimes like experiments being conducted just for like scientific reasons, just to like compare. Maybe that's why we got this result, but it has no implications on like people or the
Right.
real world.
Right. Now, do you still think it's important to conduct research like that, or should we still focus more of our efforts on human?
Both. I think they're both incredibly important
Mm-hmm.
because it may allow us to say maybe we're doing something wrong and like doing that purely for like scientific purposes to compare to another experiment.
Yeah.
Will show maybe we need to change something so it can have more of an impact, like be more relevant.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Now, you think you're still going to you said you're going to medical school.
Yeah. I don't actually just want to go to medical school.
Mm-hmm.
I plan on applying for an MD PhD program.
Oh, that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun. I used to be on the pre-medical route. My first year I was here,
Mm-hmm.
and I started doing research, and I wanted to do that as my career. And everyone told me, they're like, oh, you should get a dual MD PhD program. Big respect doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
people with the MD PhD, I mean, they rule the world. You know what I mean? You're going to have a lot of opportunities with that. But
Hopefully.
my brain does not work that fast. So I decided to switch for just the PhD.
Based on what I know, it's mostly research work and then like probably 70% research and then 30% caring for patients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just based on like, I've talked to a few MD PhDs, and that's kind of what they said it's like.
What other stuff did you learn from the MD PhDs when you were talking to them?
I mean, I was kind of, when I talked to them, I was kind of asking just like why they did it. And like what benefit has it had? What is their like daily life like?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just because, that would be my life as well.
Right.
And they kind of just said, like, it's going to be, like, a lot of bench work, lab stuff. It's like as if you're, like, a grad student. Like, doing, like, data analysis or, like, you're doing, like, performing, like, biological assays on, like, tissues you collected or something. Like, kind of doing that, like, really, like, gritty work in the lab. Overall, they kind of, one person described it as you're trying to get the pay of a doctor while doing the work of a researcher.
What do you mean by that?
So researchers don't make that much money.
True.
So most of them.
Yeah.
But doctors, make a ton.
Uh-huh.
So
So
that's the way she described her job.
So you still get paid the salary of a doctor,
yeah.
but you're doing research work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you also treat patients, and if you don't have a lot of patients to treat, then you can focus more on your lab work. Or if you don't have a grant to do your research, you can kind of fall back on treating patients. And
Yeah. Yeah, like I was saying, like, yeah, the opportunities, they seem endless with those two. Now, why would you recommend doing research to other undergraduate students?
I mean, it's just kind of like makes your mind think in a different way. Just helps you grow new perspectives. And it, for me, kind of helped fill that like creative, adventurous side of me.
Yeah.
So like I just really want to like delve deep into whatever I'm looking into and like find out like secrets or something. You know, that's just it makes me feel good and alive.
Yeah. No, people don't realize, I mean, yeah, research is a creative field. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize that, but research is very creative. And I know, like, with my coursework, that was another one of the things that pushed me to focus specifically on research is, I was learning all this stuff, biology within chemistry, and I was more interested in how it worked rather than memorizing it.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, I got frustrated.
And, like, that's how it should be taught is,
right.
Like, showing, like, how it works and, like, actually seeing the things happening.
Yeah. And, I mean, you're just fed a large amount of surface material stuff. But I mean, it's so much more interesting when you dive deeper into it and figure out why it is this way.
Yeah.
Why this works, how this has a relation to that. And I mean, yeah, I kind of got frustrated because I would be studying for an exam and I was focused on memorizing this, memorizing that. And I wanted to figure out why that did that, but it wasn't an efficient use of time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To go into the textbook and then read this and then read the whole chapter because that wasn't going to be on the exam. So like if that's not on the exam, then like why would I care about it?
Right.
But I mean, yeah, diving into things more in depth and getting creative with the way that you think about science and things. I mean, yeah, that's why research I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Hunter, if you had one more message to share with the world, what would it be?
The most important thing is like your health and happiness, and like you shouldn't necessarily try and do too much research or anything, because I mean, if it, like, for me, I can get too caught up in it and it just actually makes me feel bad doing it. So kind of just really take the time to figure out what you need, what your needs are, and fulfill those first.
Yeah. I think like people like us, and we're working to better the lives of people, improve the health of our population, and we're so passionate about that we forget about ourselves. And we need to remember that our own health is just as important as improving the health of others.
Yeah, for sure.
So if we don't take care of ourselves, and we don't perform to the best of our abilities, then our work is gonna show that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like you don't have your needs met. It's gonna affect like probably the most important things, which are like your relationships and the things you care most about. Yeah,
and you, like you said, you get so caught up in it.
Yeah.
And other parts of your personal life are going by the wayside, and you don't even realize it in the moment. But then you get that sort of little bit of break in your research or whatever you're focusing on, and then you look back at it and you're like, oh,
yeah,
was that like really worth it?
Yeah.
But
and I know like sometimes I feel guilty for like taking time to like meet my needs, and like I shouldn't. Nobody should.
Yeah.
You're like, you deserve, your needs are like basic, like they have to be met essentially. And it's okay if they don't always get met, but it's important to like before moving on after having a period of not having them met, you need to really kind of get settled.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome that you've realized that. I think there's a lot of brilliant people who don't, and in the long run, that's actually holding them back. Yeah. So, I mean, given your knowledge and what you're studying, given your passion, and then also having a good understanding of yourself and what's able to give you the best ability to produce your work, I think that's going to bring you a far way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Hunter, it's been awesome having you on. You're welcome back anytime. Again, This is your host, John, of the Research Review, creating a platform to inspire. Peace out.